Hello, dear friends. Today we continue our exploration of the memoirs of a German non-commissioned officer. Don't forget to rate this video and leave your thoughts in the comments. And now, let's begin. The battle around the Krasny observation post. The defeat near Moscow was accompanied by a similar setback in the south, where, having reached Rostov, the gateway to the Caucasus, in late November, von Kleist's tank army was forced to retreat to the Meuse River. In the central sector, the Russian counteroffensive lasted 3 months and resulted in one of the most brutal battles of the war. While the Russians were supported by a large number of Siberian ski detachments, the Germans had no winter gear. However, they managed to establish and hold a defensive line along the front near Rzhev, Vyazma, and Bryansk. This was done in accordance with orders from Hitler, who had taken command of the army in December. The battle around the Krasny observation post and other combat operations described in the following chapters likely took place near Rzhev, the northernmost of the 3 bastions, 150 miles west of Moscow. Nothing special happened today, except that the villages ahead of us were burning, and the sun, shrouded in clouds of smoke, looked like a red ball. Refugees, old men, women, and children, struggled through the snow. They dragged sleds behind them and led cows and dogs along with them. The women's long sheepskin coats hung stiffly on them, their knots and colorful blankets standing out, while the old men with their frost-covered beards looked like Father Frost's. By evening, the fire had turned blood red. Now the houses glow out of the darkness like the devil's eyes. Tonight, the infantry will withdraw to pre-prepared positions. Machine gun nests and permanent firing positions form an impenetrable line of defense, with barbed wire barriers standing in the snow like toys. The dance can begin. The white dance of death. Visibility is deteriorating. A piercing wind whips clouds of snow into the air. We see the advancing Russians as if through a veil. We watch them closely. We know they are coming for us. January 25th, 1942, 4 a.m. The nights are cold. The lying snow appears blue under the silver moon, and where there is shadow, it is indigo. 100 meters ahead, machine gun positions on the steep slope of a ravine look like a mountain ridge in the moonlight. From time to time, a sentry passes by. The snow creaks. At times, they open fire. The shots echo and can still be heard long afterward in the valley of a small river. Every 3 hours, I climb up to the observation post and for an hour peer into the distance. And when we open fire, I stand there longer. I sleep in fits and starts. Out of 48 hours, I've slept only 8. Not all nights are as quiet as this one. The sector to our left is a weak spot. The day before yesterday, the enemy set up a machine gun there and recaptured the trench in hand-to-hand combat. Yesterday, in that same sector, they broke through our defensive line. It happened toward evening. Soon, several houses in the village were on fire. The enemy rushed forward under cover of smoke. I stood outside, listening to their battle cry. They roared like charging bulls. At the same time, the Russians tried to break through the ravine and attack the village from our right flank. They were repelled. I could hear the wounded man screaming for a long time. They fired light artillery almost all night. Some guns fired tracer shrapnel shells. They flew slowly and exploded high overhead, raining down whistling shrapnel. But we unexpectedly opened fire ourselves, and our shells made more impressive sounds. They start on a high note and end with a deep, muffled rumble, like an organ. When they fly through the air one after another, they create a powerful sonic chord. Up ahead, helping to direct the fire, you see a fierce glow and powerful explosions. Huge clouds of smoke and snow obscure the entire target area. It is like a giant fist coming down. I cannot deny that I feel a sense of pride in moments like these. One can take pride in fulfilling the duty of a gunner for these heavy guns. Even though my own participation in this is quite small, these are our shells and our battery that is firing. As soon as wooden debris and earth are sent flying high into the air over enemy positions by the explosion, and the enemy's attack is choked by our fire, the infantry celebrates. The soldiers are damn happy and grateful to us. We, for our part, are proud that everything is going so well. Hunger, cold, fatigue. We forget all that when we're firing. We knew what was coming. We saw with complete clarity how events were unfolding. I made a final dash against the wind and, under artillery fire, fought my way to our flank observation post a kilometer from the front line. The enemy had already begun firing from tanks and anti-tank guns. The prelude. How well we knew it. I found the guys at the forward machine gun position and shook hands with each of them. Fall shared a piece of toast with me, and I gave him one of my last cigarettes. Then I headed back through the forest to break a trail along which a new wire was to be laid to the observation post. I moved along the magnetic azimuth in a constant hurry, and even on skis my feet sank deep into the snow. But it was already too late. A few hours later, the communication wire along the line of fire had been severed by shells in 20 places. The front between the observation post and us had been breached, and enemy signal flares were soaring into the sky in that very same forest. In the morning, there was no sign of our observers. Later, 2 of them returned. One remained lying where he fell, a direct hit. We didn't sleep that night. Our dugout became the hub where reports from 6 units poured in. People came running and ran away. Most of them didn't bring good news. Lieutenant von G was killed in hand-to-hand combat. We didn't see the Russians until they were 5 meters away from us. The dugouts are being captured one after another. We had to keep asking for new stretchers for the wounded. They arrive from behind the forest, along the wire we've strung out, which keeps getting cut. Our forward patrol's positions were cut off all night. On the 28th, the Russians made their first breakthrough on our right flank. They drove the company next to us out of their positions and occupied Point P, located on a commanding height and wedged into our flank. We opened fire with anti-tank guns and set several houses ablaze. Bakers, butchers, and medics were hastily rounded up to plug the breach. But our sled route through P was cut off. Only the forest path remained. All counterattacks failed. Night after night, we laid down heavy fire to drive the enemy out. Night after night, the infantry went on the attack after spending the night in the open since the 27th. They were well aware of the futility of these efforts. For the 3rd time, the task was to take P, at any cost. The trenches on the front line will be manned again. Anyone who abandons their post will be court-martialed and shot. The mood in our dugout is utterly bleak. The infantry company commander, Lieutenant von Hindenburg, comes from an ancient family. Dark circles have formed under his eyes from exhaustion. In moments when he thinks no one is watching him, he is overcome by immense fatigue and falls into a state of complete stupor. But as soon as he picks up the telephone receiver, his calm, low voice sounds clear and firm. He speaks to the platoon commanders with such convincing warmth and confidence that they leave reassured. His own courage is self-sufficient. It is as inseparable from him as his army uniform. It will soon be midnight. I am slowly preparing for it. Meanwhile, Lieutenant von Hindenburg has gone to sleep. His work is done. He sleeps soundly until the first messengers arrive. Shortly thereafter, I was already at the observation post, awaiting the massive artillery barrage that was to precede the attack. The night was dark blue, a starless sky arching over the illuminated panorama. The fire in P reflected a soft red light on the snow. We watched the artillery barrage. It came crashing down in a single blow, ricocheting shrapnel, like fantastical figures, leapt over the rooftops. That night, the sapper platoon, an officer and 42 soldiers, attacked the enemy. 11 men were killed, 9 seriously wounded, and 7 slightly wounded. The officer returned with an ashen face and 15 soldiers. The next morning, it was almost impossible to reach our observation post. The Russians were shelling us from the trenches they had occupied, as well as from Point P. One of the anti-tank guns was so accurately aimed at us that after each explosion, my face was showered with snow and dirt whenever I peered through the observation slit to determine the direction of the muzzle flashing with flame. We had to evacuate the observation post and retreat back into the trench. As soon as we climbed into the dugout, our small window was blown off, and we had to patch up the hole. The inevitable happened. Our positions were fired upon from the forest, 70 meters behind our dugout. Russian patrols had penetrated our rear and cut the communication line. Our men saw them. Later, our own sentries discovered that the Russians had trampled a wide path through the woods behind the main line of forward positions, from which communication with the rear was maintained via 4 telephone lines. At noon on the 31st, the battery commander arrived at the dugout. Together with Lieutenant Mack, he made another attempt to take the observation post. They failed. An anti-tank gun opened fire immediately. They were a hair's breadth from death and couldn't recover for 5 minutes afterward. It was a difficult night. They said that at Point P, 300 men were ready to attack our positions. If they had succeeded, they would have wiped us out. But we concentrated the fire of the entire regiment on that sector, and the barrage was intense. After that, we heard the cries of the wounded. Today, we were rescued. As they approached, the reinforcements came under fire and were forced to retreat. The sleds carrying equipment and other supplies fell into enemy hands. They made another attempt, and this time broke through. At 12:30 p.m. we departed, 10 men with 2 sleds and several wounded. A Russian deserter was riding ahead of us, one of those who had been wandering hungry through the forest for the past 2 days. 500 meters from the observation post, we stumbled upon an enemy patrol of 15 men. We immediately flanked them. I saw the first of them dash under a fir tree to the left of the trail, but I outmaneuvered him. When I got closer, I saw that 5 meters away, in a small hollow, 3 of them were trying to hide. My magazine emptied quickly. I pounced on them, and I managed to capture 2, including the patrol commander. The third one got away. I handed the 2 prisoners over to my comrade, reloaded my weapon, and gave chase after the fugitive. I think I probably managed to shoot him. Meanwhile, the patrol commander tried to attack my companions with a pistol. My comrade would have shot him, but the rifle misfired. The Russian's pistol trigger wasn't cocked, and my comrade knocked it out of the soldier's hands with the butt of his rifle. Then they went at each other. I arrived just in time to intervene. The rest of our detachment had already moved on. They had fired on the main group of the Russian patrol to the right of the trail. I had thought then that we would always operate with the full force of our troops, but suddenly we found ourselves alone. My comrades had also disappeared, and I was left with an infantryman with a frostbitten foot. We suffered no casualties. As for all the shouting and gunfire, our attack was so unexpected to the Russians that they never managed to organize a systematic defense. The wounded lieutenant in charge of our unit was pleased with his artillerymen. Now for a good night's sleep. February 3rd, 1942. I was promoted to sergeant for bravery in the face of the enemy. Our battery fired over 1,000 rounds from its current position. It repelled all enemy attacks in our sector. The enemy would be completely unable to operate effectively if they hadn't pinpointed our firing positions, and the Russians are never that ineffective. Yesterday, they sent a reconnaissance plane, and their third volley hit the target. Gun number 3 was overturned, 80 shells exploded, and the hit on the trench resulted in 9 casualties. One of the guys was lying 3 meters from the ammunition, but not even his eyebrows were singed. He was just covered in gunpowder from head to toe. Sergeant X, a wonderful, kind guy from our unit, was wounded at our checkpoint on the 3rd night. Early in the morning, he and 5 other wounded men were evacuated on 3 sleds. On the sled trail, the convoy encountered an enemy patrol. There were casualties among the escort, and later we discovered that those who had been wounded were dead. The sapper officer I mentioned above arrived here that same night, having suffered a through-and-through wound to his arm. He had fought his way through with our battery commander. Of his remaining 15 men, he found only 2. They no longer take prisoners on the front lines. The story of the Krasny observation post ended with us regaining our main firing line. The Russians, cut off in the forest to the southwest, now have nothing left to do but await their doom. However, the Krasny observation post endured yet another grueling night. On the evening of February 1st, it was attacked from the forest behind it by a detachment of 80 to 100 men. Lieutenant von Hindenburg was at the machine gun, while the soldiers and officers fired from behind a wooden palisade. At the same time, Lieutenant Kroll shifted our battery's fire back so that it was directed at a spot just 30 meters from the observation post's dugout. After that, the 2 further attacks the following night are hardly worth mentioning. The enemy's powerful assault came to a halt. During the day, we destroyed several smaller groups. Now the infantry is moving back, once again to their former trenches. After 9 days and nights of languishing around tiny fires under shelters of fir branches, of quiet sleep and numbness in the snow, they are unable even to answer, as if under anesthesia. The observation post must be abandoned. Glory to your memory, observation post read. Everything around is in ruins, the heavy wooden walls shattered into splinters, split stumps, broken equipment, dead horses, and a multitude of unfortunate, stiffened corpses. The snow is black before your red threshold. You have become a symbol, observation post red. 5 divisions were thrown against our single one. We reached the limits of human endurance. And yet, before me were living examples of courage and bravery. There was a staff sergeant who stood like a rock on no man's land all those days. He never once left his post. His machine gun never once jammed, but he shouted to his men to hold on. There was a red-bearded sergeant who didn't utter a sound while his wounds were being bandaged. He laughed and cheerfully addressed the 2 comrades supporting him. "I'll be back soon, gentlemen." And there was a tall company commander who slowly leaned over the parapet, took careful aim, and opened fire, shouting, "Fire at will!" as if he were at a shooting range. Such men still exist, and they are perhaps worth an entire company. Winter in the central sector. Today I went to the front line again. The red line is now only half the way to the next position. The battlefield looks grim. The road leading to our former optical observation post winds through a field of craters. The post itself took a direct hit today. Traces of destruction are also visible in our own dugout. Many of the surrounding trees are split open. Everything looks stripped bare. There's no clean snow to be seen anywhere. It's a wasteland. The steps leading to the dugout are twisted and covered in ice. You mostly slide down them feet first and crash into the door. But even if our burrow is full of dirt and lice, even if bricks are falling out of the stove and the windows no longer let in light, it is a refuge. The direct hit didn't damage it. only a little dirt fell from the ceiling. Outside, it's chaos. But inside, we feel wonderful and safe. We're old friends now, the infantry and us. We know each other by name, and, most importantly, we get along great. We live one life. We eat and drink the same food, endure the same cold, lice, and artillery fire. We're all in this together. We're aiming at the same enemy. I'm sitting right by the window, and it's hard to write. It's past midnight now, 2 o'clock. Most of us are asleep. But since not everyone can fit on the bunks, there's always someone sitting up. Be that as it may, we can't afford to have everyone sleeping. Night and day are not much different from each other. You eat, you sleep whenever it's convenient, and you don't know for how long, and immediately get down to your immediate duties. That's all there is to our duties, with moments of cruel pleasures. Yesterday they brought several blankets, the kind that were collected back home. How touching, we said. How they smell of mothballs, how clean they are. You can picture the living room with a sofa or a crib or a young girl's room from which they were taken. We held them in our hands for a second, smiling. How far away it all seemed, as if on another planet. But don't worry, things aren't that bad. We'll find our way home again. The sun shone day after day, just as it always does, and at the entrance to our shelter, protected from the wind, it melted a little snow, leaving a damp patch. This is already a foretaste of spring. The gifts were so generous that we were able to send quite a lot of woolen and fur clothing to our friends in the infantry. If our horses hold out, we'll do it. Horses are one of our biggest problems. The truth is that the internal combustion engine is a pure liability in this winter war. Everything has to be hauled by sleigh. Where all these sleighs come from is a mystery, but how these horses survive is an even greater mystery. Hay is a 3 days' journey away. The local horses live on water, straw, and beatings. It's hard to believe. A haystack is a fantastic thing. It's requisitioned, guarded, and at night, scraps are pulled from the stack. This goes all the way to the division, or even the corps. But 6,000 horses finish off this supply in a few days. We live on a strange planet. It bothers us when someone arrives from the reserve. Today, a small man arrived, covered in snow, fresh from home. There he is, in his brand new uniform, clean and lice-free, carrying himself with dignity and full of innocent ideas. We, the old trench rats, sit around him, enjoying the newcomer's company. It's funny to see a man like that. In its own way, it's touching. Compared to him, we're a coarse, foul-mouthed mass of savages. But how much healthier we are, strong enough to withstand anything. The worst is probably behind us, but if he heads toward the NPC, he might see something else. That's all for today. If you like the video, give it a like and subscribe to the channel. Bye for now, everyone. See you next time.